Hello and welcome to Thinking Aloud from WPNC and Go Donate, the podcast where we get together and share our thoughts about fundraising, advertising, and more. We're here to help charities find new donors, keep existing ones, and make the donation process easier than ever. If you like what you hear, we'd love to chat. All our details are in the bio.
Hello and welcome to the latest WPNC podcast. My name's Bob Nash from WPNC, where I'm creative director. And today we've got a fascinating subject to chat about, and that is, what are the most frequently asked questions that clients ask us about DRTV ads?
Hello there. So I'm Maria Phillips. I'm the Director of TV and Film at WPNC. Bob and I have worked together for many years, and I think it's fair to say that we both really love DRTV. We occasionally have different views, and we often come from different points of view. So we're looking forward to having a very robust discussion today about DRTV and the kind of questions that clients are always asking us.
Let's get started, shall we? Let me ask you, Maria, what do you think the most important thing is to get right if you want to make successful DRTV?
Oh, Bob, that's such a difficult one. Thank you for that. Because as we know, DRTV isn't about one thing, it's about many things. But I think if I was just going to say the most important thing for me is absolutely nailing the emotion. Because TV is an incredibly emotional medium. Fundraisers have very emotional causes. So if you don't nail the emotion, if you don't really move your audience through filming, through the music, through the voice, and of course through the script, then the chances are it's not going to work. But what's your view?
As you say, there's a lot of moving parts in a DRTV ad. I suppose if I think about starting maybe a new ad for a new client, what I would say is that getting the proposition right is probably the foundation stone of everything that follows. The demands of DRTV are such that if you don't have a single strong thought at its core, your chances of success are pretty limited and you'll get found out. And of course, sometimes it's really hard to find that proposition and to define it in a robust way. But what we have found time and time again is that the effort and the time you spend at the beginning to get your proposition right always pays off and always saves you time and heartache later on.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think every single creative that we know and we've ever worked with would agree. And I guess the only thing to add to that is a really simple-minded, compelling proposition, but one that you can get across in what is probably going to be 60 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, maybe 30 seconds even. So there's no room for waffle in TV, absolutely no room. So thank you for that, Bob. So next question. Shall I do the next question?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. My question to you, Bob, is it better to cast real people or actors in our DRTV ads?
Yeah, that's a really hot topic at the moment when so many of our clients are really interested in authenticity. And so you might think that the obvious and correct answer is always going to be to cast real people. And of course, if you get the right real people with the right story, they can be super powerful on TV. But, and it's quite a big but, it depends very much on the real people in question. Being recorded is a very unnatural experience if you're not used to it. So some people just freeze, and no matter how powerful their story, that doesn't look great on TV. And so it depends how much you're asking of them. Are they just going to say a few words, a few sentences, or are they absolutely the core of the ad? Because if they are, and they can't do it on the day, you can be in a really difficult position. Sometimes we just have people appear but not speak. And if we have them speak, we might not have them speak loads. It depends. I'd always recommend having them record themselves on their phone first to find out what they look like on camera.
No, that's a really good point. And we will often chat to them on the phone beforehand, won't we? A, just to how they come across, but B, to make sure they're 100% comfortable with it. So it can be quite tricky. And I think the other thing to say is that sometimes we find this is that you might be doing a composite case study, or you might feel it's very important to give anonymity to the case study that you're using if it's a particularly delicate subject matter. So in those cases, getting actors is probably the right thing. But I think, Bob, what we found is if you're going to get actors, don't get actors. Get people who are very natural. They may be more extras, really, if you like. They're people that are not going to ham it up for the camera, because if they do that, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I agree. I just think viewers can sniff it out if
Yeah,
someone's faking it badly.
yeah,
There are advantages to using actors, and we shouldn't just
absolutely.
dismiss that, because if you find the right actor who can deliver an authentic performance, the advantage is they're not spooked by being on camera. They can remember their lines. They can take direction, which is often really important. And of course, they're fully able and used to doing one take after another. There are a bunch of advantages to using an actor if you can find the right one.
I think you're absolutely right. And I guess the question is really the thing to be mindful of is timing. So if you are using a real person who is a little bit nervous about being in front of the camera, you need to allow more time. You need to allow the time for them to relax, to get into the pace of it. And I think also just be mindful of the director that you choose to direct them. Make sure it's somebody who we've got a very good director here who is incredibly good with real people and really making them feel at ease in front of the camera and they can really relax. There are other directors that we've both worked with who can be quite impatient, slightly spook if you're going to use a real person. So lots of pros and cons, would you say?
It's not a
Yeah.
simple question, but getting the right answer is really important to how your ad's going to look.
Yeah.
I suppose that leads us neatly onto the subject of case studies. We've touched on case studies. So I suppose a really frequent question we hear, and one I'll put to you now, is how important do you think it is to find a really good case study?
I think they are pretty important, actually. If you have a really strong, powerful case study with a very powerful need, but also equally a really strong solution, then that is a long way to having a successful TV ad. So take the time to find that case study, but it's got to be the right case study for TV. Occasionally, we might be given case studies that are absolutely brilliant for direct mail and have worked really well, but don't necessarily get across right on DRTV. It could be because the story is quite long, quite complicated. There could be all sorts of reasons. But yes, absolutely. A really important, compelling, emotional case study is absolutely crucial. What would you think?
We're just thinking about what you said about some case studies being really complex. Do you think it's okay to just pick out the core bits that are going to work on TV?
Yeah, I really do actually. I think obviously, it's got to be something that our clients are comfortable with, that by not telling the whole story, we're not in any way detracting from that particular individual's kind of journey or the charity. But absolutely, that's what TV is all about, isn't it? It's taking something that can be complicated and really simplifying it and simplifying it. Yeah, I think that can work really well. Of course, not every ad has to be one case study. What do you think?
The other way that we can solve that complexity issue, which we often do, is we say to clients, look, we'll do a simplified version of it on TV, but very often these days you've got an integrated campaign where you're doing social video, where you're doing direct mail. And in those media where you've got more space and less constraints on time, you really can explore some of the deeper elements, the more complicated elements, the harder to explain elements of the case study there. So it's not like you're just ignoring it. It's the right amount of detail in the right place, in the right channel.
Yeah, and I think something that we often remind our clients is TV is often just the start of a journey. Once you've got your new donor through DRTV, then you can tell them the much more complicated story. But you don't have that time. You've really got to be brutal in a way with TV. There's so many distractions going on for our audience, aren't there? That you've just got to nail it really and simplify it.
And I suppose just like with propositions, we often have clients who say that they've searched and they just can't find, they don't have that ultimate TV friendly, complete case study. So it's worth just bigging up the approach, which is the composite
Yes.
story. This
Yes.
isn't about making stuff up. It's about taking elements from a number of real lived experiences and just combining them in one story. And so if you can't find the ultimate case study. This is a great way
Good way.
of creating something which still has authenticity, but which you can actually piece together.
Yeah. And I guess the other option is, I think that's really important. We've had some very successful ads, haven't we, made from composite case studies. And the other option is, particularly if it's a 60-second ad or even maybe a 90-second ad, is you could have 3 little mini case studies. That's a
Yeah.
really good way, isn't it, of exploring different angles, different people, different touch points for your audience, and different ways that they've been helped.
Yeah.
The power of 3, isn't it? It works really well for DRTV, and you see it in a lot of ads. And the reason you
Yeah,
see it in a lot
absolutely.
of ads is it works. So, Bob, we're often asked about testing, aren't we? And certainly in other media, like digital, there's an awful lot of testing going on. TV, certainly on the creative side, you get a lot of media testing, but on the creative side, there's a lot less of it, isn't it? What do you think are the most important things to test with DRTV?
Yeah, for me, I think the one that has the biggest chance of having the biggest impact is testing the length of the ad. And although that sounds like a media person's answer and not a creative person's answer, of course, it brings with it all sorts of interesting challenges, because very often you've spent weeks, months perfecting a script, shooting a script for a beautiful 90-second ad. And suddenly someone says to you, I want you to take a third of that out. You can't lose a third of a DRTV ad just by cutting out occasional words. You've got to
Right.
lose whole sentences, whole scenes. So it's a really interesting challenge, but it's worth doing, because once you've proven that an ad can work on TV, if you can tell that story in less time, obviously you're just quids in. The savings and the increase in ROI are really significant. And
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things we would always say is start longer and then cut down. If an ad's
Always.
not working, say a 40-second ad isn't working, or a 60-second even, going longer isn't necessarily going to solve it. The issues with it are going to be even more obvious, if you like.
It's all about getting an ad that actually works to start with, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then moving from there.
Yeah. But I tell you what, we've had some really interesting Valex testing recently, haven't we? Where we might have taken, say, a 60-second, really successful 60-second ad and offered something at the end, a motivational thing, a nudge for the audience to respond. It could be a key ring, it could be a badge. And as long as it feels appropriate for the charity and it doesn't feel in any ways gimmicky, it's working really well. And it's just giving that extra nudge. And the interesting thing about testing Valex is that it has often, if a control ad has been around for a while and it's beginning to tire, by just doing a simple test, by adding in the Valex, it's really helped response. So that's one to keep an eye on, I think, for future reference.
There are nuances within that, aren't there? You can do an ad which says donate £5 and get this thing, but equally you can use it just as a sort of as a sweetener. So it's about the donation.
Yeah.
But then you say, and when you donate, we'll send you this to say thank you. So it's a nuance but slightly different sort of contract that you're having with the
It
donor.
adds an element of difference to the ad, doesn't it, as well? When there's all the different charity ads on TV, no matter how compelling your ad is, sometimes it's good just to have a little extra nod. But I want to ask you as a creative person, because we very rarely get kind of pure creative tests. So what would you want as a creative test, which doesn't involve offers and doesn't involve length, but is purely around the creative?
One that's always interested me is the effect of different voiceovers. And we have had some experience of this in the past where we've kept everything else in an edit completely identical, but we've changed the voiceover artist. And sometimes it's about literally changing one voice for another. Sometimes it's about changing a male voice for a female voice, a younger voice for an older voice. But we have seen some results that are really surprising. And it's a great reminder that there are very many elements in a DRTV ad that can have quite a profound effect on results. Certainly, voiceover can be one of them. And what I love about it as a test is, of course, relatively speaking, it's an inexpensive thing to try.
And I think more clients should do that, don't you? And the other thing that I would like to see, again, it's probably way down the list, is music. Because music, a different piece of music can add so much or take so much away. We've not done a direct test, but in the past, we had an example with a client where we had to change the music for copyright reasons. So we had a piece composed, a different piece, and that actually really helped increase response. So I just think it's fascinating, isn't it? Music can just add so much and change the mood of the ad so much, change the pace. But again, these are the kind of things that I think as creators, we would love to test. But I guess for clients, they're slightly less in the pecking order.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one way, an interesting way to test changing either the music or the voiceover would be if you have an ad that's worked really well, but it's starting to tire, because it
Yeah.
could be quite an effective way. So just give it a refresh
Yeah.
without investing too much more money in it,
Yeah.
and just seeing whether or not you can bring that result up
Actually,
again.
that's a really good point, because if an ad is not doing so well, and a first response from a client might be, "Oh, we'll pull it," or they might. So we might say, "Why don't you look at the music, look at the voice, and potentially even look a little bit at the edit?" And sometimes the client might respond, "Oh, but how will we know which bit it was that made it work better?" But if it really is declining, it could be a combination of everything. If it's really declining, it may not be the proposition. It may be that it just needs a bit of a refresh. And that's when you go in all guns blazing, if you like.
Talking of all guns blazing, that brings me to our last question for today. And I think it's one that you're best positioned to answer. And that is the one that always comes up, which is about the use of captions and titles. And it often comes up because a lot of people look at a DRTV ad and they say, "Oh, you've ruined the look of that ad with all those words across the screen." What do you think?
I think we both know that much as creative people, we would love to have beautiful works of art that have very subtle captions and beautiful typography. I'm afraid it just doesn't cut it for DRTV. You've got to be really clear with your audience what you want them to do. One of the very simple ways of doing that is to have captions and titles that possibly reflect what's been spoken in the voiceover, but direct them to the call to action. And it really is a case of balance between what's happening in the visual edit, but also getting the titles and the captions across really boldly and unapologetically. You're not making an ad to be admired as a charity. Hopefully you will be admired, but you're making an ad to actually raise funds or to get new donors. So you really have to work quite hard. I guess the bane of our life now is obviously all the legals that we now have along the bottom. And of course they have to be on for a certain length of time, and then you add a caption above it, and then that makes the length of time even longer. So it can be really challenging, but you have to find a way around it, unfortunately. But what do you think?
My approach to it is that making DRTV that really works well is not an easy task. I suspect far more people fail than succeed. And so I would always err towards doing anything and everything I could to give me a better chance of success. Okay, it's been great to chat today. Thanks
Oh.
very much for your time. I hope people have found this interesting. There's our 5 top questions that clients have asked us about DRTV. Hope you found it interesting. If you've got any questions or comments, please do drop us a line, and we'll see you with the next one. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found that useful. To hear upcoming Thinking Aloud podcasts, subscribe now. And if you think we could help you, get in touch. Our details are in the bio.